Welcome to RevengeGate. Get ready for a wild story from Kansas City, Missouri. On that gloomy morning in Kansas City, I sat alone in the living room preparing to celebrate my 28th birthday in silence. My name is Gretchen, and I never expected that the sudden ringing of the doorbell would mark the beginning of a nightmare. My older sister stood on the porch holding a beautifully wrapped cake box that looked completely out of place in her trembling hands. It had been months since we last spoke properly yet. Today she forced a tight smile while checking her watch repeatedly as if she had somewhere much more important to be. She shoved the heavy box into my arms, insisting that our father had demanded she bring this specific gift for my special day. Before I could even invite her inside for a glass of water, she mumbled a vague excuse about an urgent meeting, then sprinted back to her car without looking back at me. I felt a rare warmth spreading through my chest, thinking my father had actually remembered me, so I placed the cake on the dining table to call him immediately. I initiated a video chat because I desperately wanted to see his face while I thanked him for this unexpected sweet surprise. However, the moment the connection established, the smile vanished from my face because my father looked deathly pale with sweat dripping down his forehead, revealing eyes full of pure terror. He refused to wave hello, but instead started waving his hands frantically at the camera with desperate urgency. His fingers moved in a blur, signing the same message over and over until I finally froze in horror at his silent scream. "Don't eat that, throw it away immediately, she wants to hurt you." I never thought a birthday gift from my own sister could be this terrifying. So please subscribe to see how I survived this shocking betrayal. The horrific warning from my father through the phone screen sent a chill down my spine as I stared at that beautiful cake with a vague sense of dread. I felt paralyzed for a moment because the image of his terrified face contrasted so sharply with the sweet confection sitting innocently on my dining table. Although panic threatened to cloud my judgment, I maintained enough clarity not to discard the cake immediately because I needed to know exactly what was hidden beneath that frosting. I carefully packed the box back up before carrying it out to my car to drive straight to the workplace of my close friend Ray, who managed a private testing laboratory. I knew Ray would be the only person I could trust to analyze the contents discreetly without alerting the authorities before I had concrete proof. Painful memories flooded my mind during the drive as I thought about how my mother passed away in a tragic car accident exactly 1 year ago, leaving a void that we never truly filled. She left behind a very specific will that entrusted the entire management of the family trust fund to me because she knew all too well about Marie's reckless spending habits. My mother had always worried that Marie would squander the family fortune on frivolous things if she were ever given direct access to the capital. The relationship between us had been fractured for a long time due to her unreasonable jealousy regarding our financial situation and our mother's decisions. Marie always claimed that our mother favored me, which led to countless bitter arguments about money during almost every family dinner we shared in the past. She believed she deserved control over the assets simply because she was the eldest child, despite her history of gambling away her earnings. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I remembered how Marie screamed at me after the lawyer read the will last year. She accused me of manipulating our mother into cutting her out of the inheritance, even though I had nothing to do with that decision. However, my sister seemed to undergo a miraculous transformation about 6 months ago when she lost her previous job, and surprisingly offered to take Dad into her own home to care for him personally. That unexpected gesture made me feel both surprised and hopeful that she had finally decided to turn her life around for the better. I truly believed she wanted to make amends for the past by dedicating herself to making our father comfortable during his declining years. It seemed like the perfect solution because his health was deteriorating and he needed constant supervision that I could not always provide due to my work schedule. I wanted to encourage this positive change while ensuring our father received the best care, so I consistently transferred a monthly allowance of $2,500 to her account. This amount was more than enough to cover his food and basic medical needs, while providing her with a stable income for her effort. My suspicion should have started rising last month when she began complaining incessantly about rising costs and aggressively demanded I double the amount to $5,000. She claimed that the price of his heart medication had skyrocketed and that the house needed urgent repairs to accommodate his disability. I remembered feeling a knot of doubt in my stomach during that conversation because her voice sounded more desperate than concerned. I agreed to the increase at the time because I did not want to risk my father suffering from a lack of resources. Now I realized that her desperation likely stemmed from something far more sinister than inflation or medical bills. I drove faster as the pieces of this twisted puzzle started falling into place with terrifying clarity. The combination of her urgent financial desperation and that terrifying silent scream from my father made me realize a dark conspiracy was targeting my life right now. Marie had looked so nervous when she handed me the box earlier today, as if she couldn't wait to get away from the crime scene. She probably assumed I would eat the cake immediately while celebrating alone, and the poison would take effect before anyone could suspect foul play. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled into the parking lot of the laboratory, knowing that the results of this test would change our family forever. I arrived back at my house around noon after leaving the laboratory and immediately rushed to my home office to access the remote security system on my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I logged into the hidden server connected to the miniature camera I had installed inside a smoke detector in my father's living room without anyone else knowing. I had originally placed it there simply to monitor his health condition while I was at work, but today it served a much darker purpose. The footage from earlier that morning loaded slowly on the screen before revealing Marie standing over the open cake box on the kitchen island, while our father sat unaware in the adjacent room. She looked over her shoulder repeatedly to ensure she was completely alone before pulling a small paper packet from the pocket of her jeans with trembling hands. I watched in horrified silence as she sprinkled a fine white powder over the frosting and smoothed it over with a knife to hide the evidence of her tampering. The video froze on her guilty expression as I reached for my phone to dial the number of my sister's ex-boyfriend Travis, hoping he could shed some light on her recent behavior. He picked up on the second ring and sounded surprised to hear from me given how messy his separation from Marie had been several months ago. I asked him directly about her financial situation because I needed to understand what could drive her to commit such a heinous act against her own family. Travis sighed heavily before confessing that he ended the relationship because he could no longer handle the stress of creditors constantly calling their house looking for her. He explained that she had accumulated massive gambling debts and maxed out multiple credit cards to maintain a lifestyle she could clearly no longer afford. His voice dropped to a serious whisper as he delivered a warning that confirmed my worst fears about her desperate state of mind. "Gretchen, you really need to be careful because Marie is being backed into a corner by some very dangerous loan sharks who are demanding payment by the weekend. She is terrified of what they might do to her, so she might do anything crazy just to get her hands on some money." I thanked him for his honesty and ended the call just as a high-priority email notification from the laboratory popped up on my computer screen. My hands shook uncontrollably as I clicked on the attachment to read the preliminary toxicology report regarding the sample I had dropped off earlier. The document stated in bold red letters that the frosting contained a lethal concentration of a potent chemical compound often used in rodenticides, which causes immediate cardiac arrest in humans. A wave of nausea washed over me as I realized the powder I saw on the camera was indeed a weapon meant to stop my heart permanently. Before I could process the sheer magnitude of this betrayal, my phone started ringing loudly in the quiet room displaying Marie's name on the caller ID. I stared at the screen for a few seconds while trying to steady my breathing because I knew I had to answer to keep her from getting suspicious. I swiped the green icon to accept the call and was immediately greeted by her voice, which sounded sickeningly sweet and impatient. Have you eaten the cake yet, Gretchen? Because Dad keeps asking me over and over if you liked the flavor he picked out for you. The audacity of using our father's name to cover up an assassination attempt made my blood boil with a rage I had never felt before. I dug my fingernails into my palm to ground myself in reality, while forcing my vocal cords to produce a cheerful tone that masked my trembling fury. I am actually in the middle of some urgent work right now, so I haven't had a chance to cut into it yet. I promise I will eat it as soon as I finish this report because it looks absolutely delicious, Marie. She seemed satisfied with my answer and hung up quickly after telling me to enjoy my special day, while I sat there staring at the black screen. I knew that I could not simply call the police right now because she was still in that house with my vulnerable father. I needed to formulate a plan to get him out of there safely before I exposed her crimes to the authorities. My eyes drifted back to the security footage on my laptop screen where I watched her close the cake box with a satisfied smirk. That image burned itself into my memory as I stood up from my desk and began gathering the keys to my car. The next morning, when thick fog still covered the roads in Kansas City, I drove to Marie's house with a heavy heart and a mind full of terrifying possibilities. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as I parked my vehicle a few houses down the street to avoid drawing any attention from neighbors who might recognize me. I felt reasonably confident that my sister was currently miles away, trying to negotiate a desperate extension with the dangerous creditors that Travis had warned me about during our phone call yesterday. I retrieved the silver spare key that I had secretly kept since the day she moved into this rental property, and approached the front door with my heart pounding violently against my ribs. I inserted the key into the lock with trembling fingers, praying that she had not changed the cylinders since the last time I visited her over 6 months ago. The moment the heavy wooden door swung open, a wave of nauseating stench assaulted my senses, causing me to cover my nose and mouth instinctively with the sleeve of my coat. I stood frozen in the dimly lit entryway, staring in absolute disbelief at the mounds of garbage bags and empty liquor bottles that littered the hardwood floor like a landfill. This chaotic and filthy reality stood in stark contrast to the perfectly curated photographs of a pristine and luxurious home that Marie posted on her social media accounts every single day to impress her followers. I had to step carefully over discarded pizza boxes and piles of dirty laundry just to make my way through the living room without tripping over the debris of her spiraling life. The air was thick with the smell of stale alcohol and rotting food, which made me wonder how anyone, let alone my fragile father, could survive in such an environment for even a single day. I navigated through the labyrinth of clutter to reach the small guest room at the back of the house, where she had insisted our father would be most comfortable during his stay. My heart broke into a million pieces when I pushed the door open and saw him curled up on a stained mattress with only a thin, ragged sheet to protect him from the damp morning chill. He looked skeletal and pale, his eyes staring blankly at the peeling paint on the wall, without registering my presence in the room or the noise I made entering. I rushed to his side and touched his hand, finding his skin clammy and cold, which indicated he had been neglected for quite some time. I noticed his prescription bottle for heart medication sitting on the dusty nightstand, and reached for it to check when he had taken his last dose, hoping to find some record of care. However, when I poured the contents into my palm to inspect them, I immediately recognized that the small blue oblong tablets were definitely not the white, round cardiac medication he had been prescribed for years. A surge of fury coursed through my veins as I realized Marie had replaced his life-saving medicine with high-strength sleeping pills to keep him sedated and compliant, so he would not interfere with her lifestyle. This explained why he always appeared so lethargic during our brief video calls, and why he never seemed to have the energy to complain about his living conditions. I knelt beside the bed and brushed the gray hair away from his forehead, while fighting back the hot tears that threatened to blur my vision completely. I leaned close to his ear and whispered softly, hoping the vibration of my voice would reach him, even though I knew he could not hear me without his hearing aids. "Dad, I am here to pick you up. I am sorry for letting you suffer like this." He remained limp in my arms, too weak to respond, or even acknowledge that his daughter had finally come to rescue him from this nightmare. I carefully dressed him in a warm coat I found hanging on the back of the door, treating him with the gentleness one would use for a fragile porcelain doll. I shoved the bottle of switched pills into my purse because I knew it would serve as undeniable evidence of her cruelty when the time came to face the authorities. Supporting his weight entirely against my shoulder, I guided him out of that house of horrors and into the fresh morning air, which felt like a blessing after the stifling atmosphere inside. I settled him into the passenger seat of my car and buckled his seatbelt, promising silently that I would never let him out of my sight again. I started the engine and drove away toward the safety of my own home, just as the sun began to burn through the fog, signaling the beginning of the end for Marie's web of lies. Around noon, just as I had predicted, my phone began ringing incessantly with Marie's name flashing urgently on the screen. I stared at the vibrating device for a few seconds to gather my composure before answering, because I knew this performance had to be convincing enough to lure her into my trap. As soon as I slid my finger across the screen to accept the call, Marie's frantic voice exploded through the speaker, demanding to know why our father was not in his room. She sounded furious and terrified at the same time, because losing control of him meant losing her leverage and her cover story for the neighbors who might ask questions. She accused me of kidnapping him and screamed that I had no right to enter her house without permission, while threatening to call the police on me for trespassing. I waited for a momentary pause in her aggressive tirade before responding with a voice that I forced to sound incredibly weak and breathless. I told her that I had picked Dad up earlier because I desperately wanted us to be together for my birthday celebration, but I was suddenly feeling terrible. I described how the room was spinning violently around me and that my head felt like it was being split open by a heavy hammer. I made sure to specifically mention that the severe nausea started right after I had eaten a large slice of the cake she brought over yesterday. There was a brief, heavy silence on the other end of the line as Marie processed what I had just said and realized that her poisonous plan was finally working. When she spoke again, the anger and panic had completely vanished from her tone, replaced by a chillingly fake concern that made my stomach turn. She told me in a soothing voice that I was probably just exhausted from working too hard and insisted that I should unlock the front door and lie down immediately. She promised to drive over right away to take care of both me and Dad, claiming that she knew exactly what to do to make me feel better. I agreed weakly and ended the call, knowing that she was likely rushing to her car at this very moment with excitement to watch me take my last breath. I turned to my father, who was sitting on the edge of the sofa watching me with a mixture of confusion and deep concern in his eyes. I explained to him through sign language that Marie was coming over and that we needed to work together to expose her true nature once and for all. I guided him into the guest bedroom down the hall and instructed him to lock the door from the inside and only come out when he heard me give the specific signal we agreed upon. He grabbed my hand tightly with his trembling fingers and looked deep into my eyes before raising his hands to sign a short message. "Be careful, my daughter." I nodded firmly to reassure him and forced a confident smile to let him know that I was in control of the situation before closing the door and hearing the lock click. I rushed to my bathroom to prepare the final visual details of the stage I was setting for my sister's grand entrance. I found a pale foundation that was several shades lighter than my skin tone and applied it generously to my face to simulate the pallor of someone in critical condition. I dabbed a significant amount of white powder onto my lips to make them look dry and bloodless, creating the appearance of severe dehydration and toxic shock. Satisfied with my ghostly reflection in the mirror, I walked slowly to the living room and unlocked the front door just as Marie had requested. I positioned myself on the sofa with one arm dangling limply over the side and my head thrown back against the cushions to look as helpless as possible. I focused on slowing my breathing to shallow, ragged gasps and closed my eyes to wait for the arrival of the woman who used to be my sister. Lying there in the silence, I felt a profound sadness that it had come to this, but I knew I had to be strong for myself and for my father. I listened intently for the sound of her car engine, ready to play the victim one last time so that the truth could finally be revealed. 30 minutes later, the piercing sound of tires screeching violently against the asphalt echoed right outside my front door, signaling that Marie had finally arrived at the scene. I lay perfectly still on the velvet sofa with my heart pounding against my ribs, while I focused on keeping my breathing shallow and erratic to maintain the illusion of a dying woman. The front door burst open with a loud bang as Marie rushed into the living room without bothering to knock or call out my name, which confirmed her desperation to verify my condition. Through my eyelashes, I watched her silhouette freeze in the center of the room as her eyes locked onto my motionless body draped across the cushions. Instead of rushing to my side to check my pulse or fumbling for her phone to call for an ambulance like a normal sister would, she stood completely still. A slow and terrifying smile spread across her face as she realized that her plan had seemingly worked to perfection, and the only obstacle between her and the inheritance was fading away. I decided it was time to test the last shred of humanity she might have left, so I fluttered my eyelids open with great effort and looked up at her with pleading eyes. I summoned every ounce of acting ability I possessed to make my voice sound wet and broken as I reached a trembling hand toward her. "Marie, please help me because I think I am dying. My chest feels so heavy and I cannot breathe. Please call 911 for me right now." Marie looked down at my outstretched hand with an expression of pure disgust before she swiped it away coldly, causing my arm to fall limply back onto the sofa. She straightened her posture and smoothed out her jacket as if she had just brushed off a piece of lint rather than rejecting her dying sister's plea for life. She reached into her purse and pulled out her smartphone, but she did not dial the emergency services number that could have saved me. I listened in horror as she dialed a contact she evidently had on speed dial and brought the phone to her ear with a confident swagger. Her voice was loud and clear in the silent room as she delivered the news to whoever was on the other end of the line. "Listen to me carefully because the problem is solving itself right now as we speak. She is taking her last breaths on the couch, so I will be the sole heir to everything by tonight. The insurance money will clear next week, and I promise I will pay you every single cent I owe." She ended the call with a satisfied click and shoved the phone back into her pocket before turning her attention to the contents of my home. She began to wander around the living room with the critical eye of an appraiser rather than a grieving relative. I watched through narrowed eyes as she ran her fingers possessively along the edge of my imported television set and picked up a crystal vase to check the brand name on the bottom. She was already mentally calculating the liquidation value of my life before my body was even cold, which made my stomach churn with nausea that wasn't feigned. She muttered numbers under her breath while scanning the artwork on the walls and nodding to herself as if she had already spent the money she expected to gain from selling them. After she finished her preliminary inventory of my possessions, she walked back to the sofa and loomed over me like a vulture waiting for its meal to finally expire. I let out a ragged gasp to draw her attention, and she leaned down until her face was inches away from mine. I could smell the faint scent of alcohol on her breath, mixed with her expensive perfume, as she invaded my personal space. She looked deep into my eyes without a hint of remorse or sadness, and whispered the cruelest words I had ever heard in my entire life. "Don't look at me like that because you really have no one to blame but yourself for this outcome. Why did you have to be so stingy with everything Mom left us when I needed it so much? You have to die today so that I can finally have enough money to really live." The absolute malice in her voice caused the blood to freeze in my veins and shattered whatever tiny fragment of sisterly love I had been holding onto all these years. In that singular moment of clarity, I realized that the sister I grew up with was truly gone and replaced by this monster consumed by greed. My heart hardened into stone as I accepted that there was no turning back from this betrayal and that justice had to be served without mercy. I closed my eyes one last time to signal my defeat, while mentally preparing myself to spring the trap that would end her delusions of wealth forever. The time for sorrow had passed, and now it was time for the dead to rise and speak the truth. Just as Marie was completely immersing herself in the delusional fantasy of inherited wealth, the heavy door to the guest bedroom suddenly burst open with a force that seemed to shake the entire house. My father stepped out from the shadows of the hallway with a posture so upright and commanding that he looked nothing like the frail invalid I had rescued earlier that morning. His eyes were blazing with a fire I had not seen in years, while he pointed a trembling finger directly at the woman who had tormented him for months. Although he could not speak a single intelligible word due to his condition, the guttural sounds of raw fury that erupted from his throat were more terrifying than any scream I had ever heard. He advanced on her with a righteous anger that made him seem 10 feet tall, causing Marie to jump back in genuine shock at this unexpected interruption to her victory. However, the shock quickly morphed into disgust because her instinct to degrade him was deeply ingrained in her twisted personality after months of unchecked abuse. She did not recoil in shame, but instead lashed out with the same venomous tongue she had used to poison our family dynamic for years. Her face contorted into an ugly sneer as she screamed at him with a voice full of hatred that echoed off the walls of my living room. "You useless old man, why are you even here right now? Get back inside that room and get out of my sight immediately." Those cruel words were the final signal I needed to end this charade, so I opened my eyes fully and pushed myself up from the sofa with deliberate slowness. The transformation from a dying victim to an avenging judge was instantaneous, as I sat straight up and fixed my sister with a glare sharp enough to cut glass. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized that the corpse she was mocking was actually witnessing every single second of her depravity. I reached up to wipe the white powder from my lips with the back of my hand before delivering the sentence she deserved, with a voice cold as steel. "Are you quite finished with your performance yet, Marie, because the curtain has officially fallen on this little show?" Marie froze in place as if she had been struck by lightning, her mouth opening and closing repeatedly, without producing any sound while her brain struggled to process this impossibility. She looked from me to our father and back again, while her hands began to shake uncontrollably, causing her to drop her expensive designer handbag onto the floor with a dull thud. The arrogance that had radiated from her just moments ago evaporated instantly, replaced by a primal terror that made her knees buckle underneath her. She stammered out a question that sounded pathetic in the heavy silence of the room, her voice trembling so violently it was barely audible. You mean you are not dead? Did you actually trick me into coming here?" I did not dignify her question with an answer, but instead reached under the coffee table to retrieve the thick file folder I had prepared earlier. With a swift motion of my arm, I threw the contents across the table so that the papers scattered right in front of her trembling feet. The toxicology report from the laboratory landed face up, clearly highlighting the lethal dosage of poison she had put in the cake next to the bottle of switched sleeping pills I had recovered from her house. But the final nail in her coffin was yet to come, as I picked up my phone and tapped the screen to replay the audio of the call she had just made. Her own voice filled the room, cold and calculating, talking about my death and the insurance money with a callousness that made the air feel frigid. "She is taking her last breaths on the couch, so I will be the sole heir to everything by tonight." Hearing her own incriminating words played back to her shattered whatever composure she had left and forced her to confront the reality of her situation. She realized there was absolutely no way to talk herself out of this trap because I had gathered every piece of evidence needed to put her away for a very long time. The realization broke something inside her, unleashing a torrent of hysteria that sounded more like a wounded animal than a human being. She fell to her knees amidst the scattered papers and began to scream wildly, tearing at her own hair in a fit of madness. She did not ask for forgiveness or show any remorse for trying to kill her own sister or abuse her father. Instead, she poured out a stream of toxic confessions blaming everything and everyone but herself for the monster she had become. It is not fair because Mom always loved you more than she loved me. I had to do it because those debt collectors were going to kill me. If I didn't pay them, I deserve that money more than you do. Her shrieks of jealousy and entitlement filled the room, confirming that there was no humanity left in her to save. I looked at my father, who was standing beside me with tears of sorrow running down his aged face, and I knew we had made the right choice. We stood together, a united front against the storm of her hatred, waiting for justice to finally arrive and sweep the wreckage away. When the wailing sirens of police cars echoed through the quiet neighborhood, Marie's face went completely pale as the blood drained from her skin in an instant. The red and blue lights flashing against the living room window signaled the end of her freedom and sent her into a state of absolute panic that was pitiful to witness. She scrambled backward in a clumsy attempt to escape the inevitable consequences of her actions, shoving the heavy coffee table over with a loud crash to create a barrier between herself and the front door. She turned on her heel and sprinted toward the back exit of the kitchen, hoping to disappear into the alleyway before the officers could breach the perimeter of the house. However, her desperate flight was cut short immediately because the police had already surrounded the entire property to ensure there was no possibility of escape for the suspect inside. The back door burst open, revealing two uniformed officers with their weapons drawn, who ordered her to get on the ground with authoritative voices that brooked no argument. I watched without moving a muscle as my sister was forced onto the hardwood floor where she belonged, her expensive clothes now wrinkled and pressing against the cold surface. The metallic click of the handcuffs locking around her wrists sounded like the closing of a heavy book marking the final chapter of our relationship as siblings. As the officers hauled her to her feet and began to march her toward the front door, she turned her head back to look at me with eyes full of desperate tears. She began to scream my name over and over again, begging me to intervene and tell the police that this was all just a terrible misunderstanding between family members. She pleaded for me to call a lawyer or post her bail, invoking the memory of our mother and the bond of sisterhood that she had so easily discarded just moments ago for money. I stood firmly beside my father with my hand resting protectively on his shoulder and met her gaze with an expression of absolute indifference. I did not feel a single ounce of pity for the woman who had replaced our father's heart medication with sleeping pills and tried to poison me on my birthday. I spoke clearly enough for her to hear over the commotion, telling her that the sister I once loved had died the moment she decided to value an inheritance over our lives. I refused to offer any assistance or comfort because saving her from the consequences of her own malice would be an insult to the suffering she had inflicted on our father. The officers led her out to the waiting patrol car, where she continued to wail and struggle against the reality of her new life as a criminal. The subsequent investigation at the police station was thorough and swift, thanks to the overwhelming amount of evidence I had meticulously gathered against her. The toxicology report from the laboratory, combined with the recording of her confession, provided the prosecutors with an airtight case for attempted murder and first-degree elder abuse. Marie tried to play the victim during her interrogation by blaming her gambling addiction and the pressure from loan sharks, but the detectives were not swayed by her tears. She is currently awaiting trial behind bars without bail, and her lawyer has already informed us that she is facing a very long prison sentence that will likely consume the best years of her life. 3 months have passed since that nightmare ended, and the dark clouds that hung over our family have finally dissipated completely to reveal a brighter future. I walked with my father through the local park in Kansas City this afternoon, enjoying the warmth of the autumn sun on our faces and the sound of children playing in the distance. His health has improved dramatically since he moved in with me. He has gained weight, his color has returned, and most importantly, the fear has vanished from his eyes. He stopped by a bench to rest and turned to me with a genuine smile that reached his eyes, signing that he felt truly happy for the first time in years. Seeing him at peace made me realize that I had made the right decision to cut the toxic tie with Marie, even though it was incredibly painful at the time. We often cling to the idea that family must be preserved at all costs, but true peace only comes when we have the courage to remove those who poison our lives, regardless of blood relation. Greed and jealousy are potent toxins that can destroy the strongest bonds, and we must never tolerate evil actions simply because they are committed by someone we call family. Thank you so much for listening to my story and supporting me through this difficult journey of justice and healing. Please share your thoughts in the comments below about how I handled the situation with Gretchen, and remember to subscribe for more stories.